obligations, and so on. So with all of these things happening, they are not negative things to experience. These different feelings, the anger, the hate, the anxiety, or even feeling tense is normal. But what we must not do is remain in those states for extended periods of time. And what we must also be able to do is to know and be aware that we're feeling these ways, these types of ways, so that we can then actively counter these emotions so that we can go back to normal. And one of the things that also reflects health, psychosocial health, is optimism. Optimism is when you say, you're positive about things. And a lot of negative is there to go around. But if you can find the silver lining, as they say, the thing that is positive about it, or find solutions, be solution oriented. There are situations and challenges that will come at you, but don't focus on the problem so much, focus on the solution, and you'll be very surprised. And one of the things that find a solution if you're looking for one, psychosocial health is optimism. And optimism, if you find, I'm hearing some background noise, but if you find that you don't work well with others, then that might be another indicator of something that is happening that you need to check. Because working alone is not necessarily a positive thing. Again, one of the things psychosocial health is about is not being isolated. So you don't want to be a loner, because then that means you're suffering silently, or there's something happening with you and you're basically going into your shell, and we don't want you to do that. All right. So when we look at the emotional health, we're talking about feelings, right? And I want to ask for you to interact with me. I want you to participate here. And I want you to tell me about some feeling words. You can just type them in the chat. Ways that you can feel. Can I have some feedback on feeling words that you know, or emotions that you have experienced? Lovely. I see Natasha saying happy. Yes. And happy is one of those feelings, I can tell you right now, that even if you are not having an event that makes you happy, you can actually think yourself into that space. For example, you can think about things that make you happy, like your child doing very well at school. Okay, Kimon has pain. Yes, that one is definitely one you can't forget. Kimon, when you feel pain, you remember. Sad, Philip has put sad there. Yes, lovely. I love the participation. So when we talk about feeling and emotion, they're basically the same, right? Now, one of the things I want to understand here is, well, probably you won't say, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do any of you feel happy at this present time, or are any of you feeling pain at this present time, or are any of you feeling sad? Any of the things that we've expressed so far? Natasha, can we have Natasha share what she is feeling and how her mental space is? Natasha, can you go ahead and share that you're feeling happy and how that really feels?
Good evening, everyone. Well, I am happy because I am a new mommy, and so I'm just enjoying my leave with my daughter, a new mommy. So she makes me extremely happy.
Okay, Natasha, so you just had a baby?
Yeah, and I'm so excited.
Congratulations. Everybody
She's
congratulate Natasha on that.
she's
Lovely.
6 months. Next week she'll be 6 months.
Very lovely. Oh, I think I was muted. So I want to know if anybody else is experiencing any of the other emotions, so we can hear how that impacts them and what could be the cause of it. We had pain and we had sadness. Anybody else want to share? Be interesting to hear about that. All right, so let me explain a little. I'm thinking you guys already know this, but it's good to talk through. The feeling or the emotion of happiness would have obviously the opposite effect from the feeling of sadness or pain. And that is why we want to talk about this psychosocial health. Because when we're feeling pain, often we are not able to function. That's one of the things that will happen. So, for example, as a parent, if you're interacting with your child and your child has a need, maybe because maybe you're recovering from something, you might not be able to process what that child has to say. And so while we understand all of that, we want to be able to say to you, we have to be really, really aware of how the emotions impact what we do, how we feel, and what we say. Another thing is, as I said before, when you're going through these feelings, the important thing is the length of time you're experiencing these feelings for. You don't want to stay in the negative type of for a long period of time, right? You don't want to be in pain for a long period of time. So if it's something that you need medical help with, then it is recommended that we deal with it so that we can definitely get back to full health. If you are sad and you want someone to talk to, there are different ways that you can, sometimes we have the church community where we have pastors and so on that we can speak to. Sometimes you just need to speak to your friend, someone that you can trust, but we certainly don't want to remain in some of the negative spaces for a long period of time, right? And if some of the things that are impacting you are coming from your childhood, then it's even more important that we're able to identify those things and deal with them. Next slide, please. All right. So here we're saying, do you think there is a relationship between the way you think and the way you feel? And that question, I'm throwing it out at the parents. Do you think there is a relationship between the way you think and the way you feel? Thanks, Stone. Yes. Janita, yes, thanks. Anybody disagrees with that? That there's a relationship between how we think and how we feel? No. So I'm thinking most of us agree that, there is a relationship between the way we think and the way we feel. And for most of us, we think it's how you feel affects how you think. But that's the way we often think. So if I'm sad, then I'm not going to be thinking certain happy thoughts. But you'd be surprised to find out that how you think more impacts on how you feel. So that then tells you something. That tells you that you can actually impact how you feel. Because when you think a certain way, then you either entertain whatever it is that is happening to you that may not be necessarily a positive experience. So what we want to talk about is everybody has beliefs and values, right? And when you talk or when you relate to other persons and respond to things, those are based on your belief system and your value system. And it certainly reflects on your mental health, right? And that's why we're talking about psychosocial health. And it spans the emotions, the mental, the spiritual, and the social. So there's a direct link between how you think and how you feel, right? And then guess what? How you think and feel affects how you behave. So that's true. So that's why we say if you're angry, nothing is wrong with being angry, but then you have to be able to understand that you're angry and say you're in a situation where you're having a discussion. There's something that you're trying to work out. Then if you keep that feeling and you behave in that tone where you're probably going to shout at somebody, then that anger is affecting the way that you're behaving. So that's why we're saying it's very important you're taking stock of these different dimensions, how you feel, right? So your mental health, sometimes when we use that word, persons start thinking, I don't have a mental problem. It's not about that. It's really just about being able to have peace of mind. I'm sure you heard that phrase before. Peace of mind is a beautiful, wonderful thing. And sometimes when we're broke, peace of mind is the hardest thing to come by. Sometimes when you have certain things happen, peace of mind doesn't come easily. But what we have to be able to do is to learn how to problem solve, or how to manage, or how to cope, so that these things don't take over our lives and then become, negative things in our lives. And poor mental health doesn't necessarily demonstrate itself like, if you cut your hand, you see the blood. That's not really how it works. You don't normally see the damage in that way, but certainly you might see it manifested in behavior, and the behavior doesn't always have to be the kind of behavior where people are angry or aggressive. Sometimes people just, get into them shell, and they're quiet and reserved, and you can't reach them. And it's really, the two opposites are really dangerous opposites, because when persons, you ever hear about, people taking their own lives and stuff like that? That might be one of the causes, when persons don't share and they decide that they're just going to suffer in silence. And maybe if they did share, they'd find that, listen, you're not the only one going through that. And so that would kind of help them feel like, okay, so this is not really me. This is just something happening to me. And you have to be able to make that distinction, all right, in life. So there's a clear relationship between what you think and how you feel, and you don't want to harbor the negative thoughts. As I said before, it's all about managing them and not staying in them. All right, next slide, please. Is Mrs. Chin there? Because that's the social come up. Okay, I'll just do social, and then Miss Chin will finish up the final two dimensions. So when we talk about social health, a lot of you are very social persons. There are some persons who will be fine being alone in them house watching them TV, and then there are some persons who have to come out of the house, say hello to Sarah over there and John over there. And so we are different persons. But one thing we certainly need to look at is how we relate to other persons. And other persons don't have to be your friends. They can be the teacher at school, and they can be colleagues at work, all of that. So the question is, has your interaction with your family, friends, neighbors been affected since the onset of COVID? And I want you guys to talk to me now, because for me, I may not have been as much in touch with my friends as I would have prior to the pandemic. So, sometimes you feel very guilty because you realize that a 2 month has passed and you haven't spoken to them. But I'm asking the parents, how has your interaction with your family, friends, and neighbors been affected since the onset of COVID? You can raise your hands and it will probably unmute a mic and you probably can share. So do the hand raising and we can identify persons and we ask you to share. Do we have anyone willing to? Okay, Janelia. Thank you, Janelia. Go ahead. Unmute Janelia and go ahead and share how COVID has affected your relationships with your family. Janelia? Okay, we're not getting Janelia at the moment. Anybody else want to share how COVID has impacted their relationships, whether it's with family, friends, or neighbors? Okay, Rosemary, thank you. Go ahead. You can.
All right. I'm just going to share how it has affected me positively. To us, COVID has brought about many negative behavior. But during COVID, I was at home sometimes, at work sometimes, but people would call you to find out how you're doing. You would call someone to find how they are doing, how they're coping with it, and so on. Persons who you might not have spoken to a long time, but now you're concerned because you know this thing is affecting persons. Persons are dying, persons are getting ill, and so on. So that interaction there develop because you are trying to find out, and persons are trying to find out from you how you're doing, what is happening, how we can assist, and so on. So I think it also had some positive impact on me. There were negatives as well. in that I had to stay home sometimes and I wouldn't go out and meet my friends and so on. Or I couldn't go to church and all of that to interact with people. But we use the social media a lot. And so persons, I think, were showing more concern about even your feeling, how you're feeling, how you're coping, and so on. So it also had some positive outcome for me.
Thank you for sharing, Mrs. Chi. And I'm going to share a scenario so that our parents can be more open to what we're talking about here. So let us paint this scenario. We have Marcus. Marcus lives with his girlfriend, Pat, okay? And they have two children together. Marcus is upset by the way he parents as versus how Pat parents. So they don't parent the same way, and he's upset how they parent the son in particular. So whenever there's an argument, Marcus, he just leaves the house because he doesn't want to get into an argument with Pat. So he just, walk out of the house because it's like he can't bother. So he leaves, right? And guess where he goes? He visits the bar close to his home and him stay there, right? And him drink. And then when him know that everybody gone to them bed, he comes home. So what we're seeing is that they are not resolving the issue. So every time there's an issue with the son, you're going to find that they're going to have this unresolved conflict, right? Now, since COVID pandemic came about, things have gotten worse because guess what? Them closed bar. Remember, you can't really come out of the house now. Remember, in the height of the pandemic, we all had to stay home. So things have become worse, and there's curfew. So Marcus can't go to the bar. Now, what do you think can happen in this situation when Marcus is at home now and he can't escape? And here is the situation with him wife, Pat, or girlfriend, Pat, and the son. Anybody want to talk and tell me, what they think going to happen here? Anybody want to raise their hand and tell me, no, that Marcus can't run to the bar to get a drink and he has to be at home while this is happening? What they think is going to happen? How is this going to play out? Kimon, thank you. You can go ahead.
Well, he must stay sober.
I like that. I like that, Kimon. Anything else? Just that he'll be staying sober?
He'll stay sober and I don't know. Really
what action could come out of staying sober? What positive action could come out of this?
No, but staying sober in itself is a positive result. So we're not going to negate a positive result. Yeah, it might just kick that habit of drinking, but the problem is not going away, Kimon. That's the thing. The problem is not going away. So we would love for him to stay sober, but the problem is going away. So what is he going to do now to deal with the fact that this is happening again? Anybody want to give a guess as to how they think it will play out?
Good evening. This is Grace and Mommy Natalie Sterling.
Good
I
evening.
believe towards a scenario, it can be, to me, it could bring a good impact as well as negative. It might even make the situation, being as though he's been confined in the home and the arguing, and it could make situation worse.
Right.
And looking at it from a positive side now, because he have nowhere to go now, so he just have to sit and face the reality. So maybe he would get a chance to talk. It can bring both good and bad to me, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree with you very, very much. The situation can go worse. And in the worst, what we're seeing in the worst scenario, unfortunately, could be called a fight because the argument can escalate to where he may put his hand on Pat, and that can become something that we don't want. And then, as our speaker just said, it could be a positive, and we like to look at the positives because if that situation come up for anyone, we want them to be able to identify how else this situation can be handled. So now that he cannot escape, he might be able to say what, because sometimes people just need to say what is on their mind, because nobody's going to fight them. But maybe he just never really was able to communicate and express what it is he didn't like about what Pat was doing with her discipline. And so, yes, it could be a positive outcome in that he could speak his mind and it could be received, because that's what we want. We want to allow persons space where they can say what they want and you listen. And then you can then say what you feel, and then we can find some middle ground, because I think they both want the same results. I think they both want to discipline their child, but maybe it's the way Pat is going about it that he has a challenge with. But certainly, the fact that he was going to the bar means that he wasn't coping well. So those are coping mechanisms that we call wrong or maladaptive, because they don't really help. Because when he's running away from the problem and he's drinking, he may be creating another problem, because maybe money that should be going into the household to help with the grocery and so on is going to the bar. And also, when people get drunk, they don't really have much control. And so we have lots of things that can go wrong when we choose the wrong coping style. So what we have to remember is deal with the situations, but deal with them in a way that is healthy, and so that we can resolve them. That is really the goal, right? So we don't want the worst case scenario at all, but we want more a situation where he's able to express himself and Pat is willing to listen, and he allows Pat as well. You notice it's a two-way thing to express herself, and he is willing to listen. Now, one of the things we don't notice sometimes is where we're coming from. Because what if Marcus is saying Pat is beating the son and him don't like it? Because he didn't grow up that way and he grew up fine. But while Pat is saying, listen, them beat me and nothing went wrong with me, I came out just fine, and you have to beat children these days for them to learn. So that could be the disagreement that they're having there. And so you realize that your past experiences have a lot to do with your belief system and how you feel about things. And so you really would want to talk through those things so you can understand where each side is coming from. And that's where healthy coping is takes place. All right, so when we talk about social health, that's what we're talking about, how you relate to your family. So, you know, Marcus and his girlfriend, how you relate to your friends, how you relate to your co-workers, and importantly, as parents, how we relate to our children. Because if you're going to grow your child how you were grown, maybe you need to think a little bit about that, because guess what? Time has changed, and time has changed quite a bit. So what you would have done, what your parent would have done for you may not necessarily be what should happen. No, we have to look at it differently. And that is one of the things that the National Parenting Support Commission is looking at, how we discipline our children. And corporate punishment is one of the things that they're against, because they think that that sometimes causes, you know, damage to children that will then in turn impact them negatively, right? How we feel affect how we think, and it will affect how we relate to others, right? So we have to definitely be aware of what happened to us in our past and see how that is informing what we're doing now. So sometimes you know you were a bad child, and you might now project that onto your child and say, okay, so you're going to be bad, I'm going to whip you into shape. But the child probably not going to be as bad as you were. You are just thinking that is what is going to happen. And sometimes we need to be able to express ourselves to our children too, because sometimes we feel like we don't need to. But sometimes they also need to understand that you were children at one point in time and you were doing some of the things you were doing at one point in time, but you are smarter now. And so because you learned your lesson, you want them to also not suffer or go through some things. So again, we have to be very mindful of how our past is impacting our present and our future. So that's one of the things I want you guys to take away from this today. How your unresolved experiences. Maybe you need to talk to your father or your mother about some of the things you felt you experienced as a child, and maybe having that conversation with your parent will help you understand, you know, what happened, and help you put you in a space where you can, you know, have better mental and psychosocial health. And this pandemic is not really helping us as much, because this pandemic has put us in a space where we're more with persons than, you know, we used to spend some amount of time apart, but no, they're just there all the time. So you're more aware of all the things you don't like and probably less aware of the things that you do like. So then we have to talk and communicate about how we can coexist, you know, and what we probably need to fix. All right, let me see if there's any notes I should give you. All right, Mrs. Chin, I think it's over to you now for the spiritual health.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Just to highlight to what Miss said about social though. Within this time, though, the COVID time, what we could do, though, is find creative ways because we were at home and so we were interacting with our families. And as Mr. said before, we have to find time to spend with our children and our other family members, allow them to speak. Communication is a way that helps us to improve our appropriate behavior and to find out what are our likes and dislikes, to say to our family members, these are the things that are affecting us. How can we change? How can we meet each other halfway? How can we compromise? So socially, we have to interact with each other. And interaction is where we help to solve conflicts that exist. And we also help each other. Because when you share, you find out what the person, you find the feeling that the person is having and how you might be contributing to that feeling and how you could maybe help to build positive behavior in that child. And another very important thing is to listen to our children. They should listen to us, but we should also listen to them. Because sometimes when we are able to speak to us, we know how they feel and we are able now to relate to them better. All right, so just to add a little there to what Mr. said. Now, spiritual, as the word spiritual suggests, our relationship with our Creator. What is our relationship with God? All right, so we identify activities that help us to feel closer to God. And parents, sharing now, what are some of the activities that we are engaging that help us to feel closer to God? Anybody want to share? Just unmute your mic if you want to share. What are some of the ways that help us to feel closer to God? What are some of the activities that we are involved in that help us to feel closer to our Creator? Anybody want to share with us?
Janelle, your hand is up.
Yes. Person who's hand is up, yes. Not hearing. I wonder if your mic is muted. Could you unmute your mic? A second hand is up. Mr. Bernard, could you help us here? You know if the person mic is unmuted.
Good morning, may go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Thank you.
Hello. Good night. Well, we have a school group, and I try to pray in there every morning.
Okay,
For
thank
the
you.
teachers and the students.
All right, thanks very
also.
much.
Yeah.
All right, so that's one way. Yes, any other?
Well, I gather my kids at night and we pray together night and morning. And I attend church service online
All right.
every Tuesday and Fridays.
Okay, so you see, even COVID there, we were still able to do it using our social media. All right, good. Anything else?
No.
All right, thank you. So that's one way by which, or two ways there, by which we can promote our spiritual health. So you see, spiritual is thinking about our soul. How can we, and this help us to cope, not only spiritually, but socially and emotionally as well. Because when we have a relationship with God, then we are better able to show love and compassion and understanding to our co-workers, our children, our mate, and so on. So this should also help us in our spiritual health. Another way to build our spiritual health is to engage in gratitude exercise, showing gratefulness. Show people that you are grateful, and even to our children. When our children do something good, congratulate them. Because I know many times we think of the bad, and when they show some inappropriate behavior, we are quick to tell them where they are wrong. And that is good. But we also need to congratulate them when they do good things. When they do well in school, when they do a chore and it's well done, we also need to say to them, I'm pleased. I really appreciate what you have done. And so you spend time there letting them know that you really appreciate them. All right. Now, another thing that persons look at when we are talking about spiritual health or spiritual well-being.
Miss Jane,
How could, yes?
another parent has their hand up.
Pardon me, I'm not hearing.
Another parent has their hand up.
All right, thank you, sir. Yes.
McLean.
Okay, good evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, another way I would like to add, good evening, everyone, is to, well, for me, what I do with my kids is that we have like a little prayer just before we have like a movie night. So we normally would like pray, and then we would gather and watch movie, whether it be on a weekend night, preferably a Friday night. So we do that.
All right, thanks for sharing.
We normally say the family that prays together stays together. So we normally do that.
Thank you. All right. And so that is taking both spiritual and social, because they are interacting with each other and they are praying together. So both of them there we are seeing, all right, both spiritual and social health. Okay. And somebody said that they spend time praying and having devotion. And that's very important, because when you have devotion, guess what? It does not only help you spiritually, it also helps you emotionally, because now you start to think positively. And so you are now having positive thoughts that could also help your mental health as well as your spiritual health. All right. Now a question on our screen says, how could your faith be questioned or shaken during this time, during this COVID time? You have tried to build your spiritual, but how could this be questioned during this time? What are some of the things that people might think during this time to say, I wonder if that person is What about not being able to go to church? Was that something that affected us badly? Because I know some persons miss their church, miss their spiritual partners that they would pray with and talk with. Some persons didn't have any internet that they could interact with anybody spiritually. Some persons had the internet, but it was very unstable and they were not able to share with each other. And so there, that could question, people could question, or they could also question their own spiritual health. But as a parent share with us, although we might not be able to go to church or to different church activities, we were able to do that within our homes. So that too could also build our spiritual health. Next slide, please, sir. Yes, somebody else want to share? Yes.
Good night again. The whole fact was that you couldn't interact with nobody socially.
Yes.
Physically. It kind of make you, you could go to church. If you even go to church, you have to stay a distance.
Yes.
The whole pandemic thing changed up life itself.
So you were saying that it had a negative impact?
Yeah. It changed because we are people that will normally hug, and greet when we greet each other and all of those things. It just cut out. It can't work no more because you're scared. You don't want to hug that person there. You don't even want to go too close no more.
Yes.
So our whole life turned upside down and change. It's a change.
Okay.
It's a change that we have to adapt to. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. And I heard this is something adapting, right?
Yes.
And so those changes, pardon me?
We have to just try to adapt to those changes.
Okay, good. Right. And what we need to understand that life has a lot of changes in it. And so that is why to build our spiritual health, we find ways of support. And if we look at it, the importance of counseling could be one way of gaining support to help us to cope with some of these issues that we are having. Because we are social beings. And so because we are social beings, we like to socialize with each other. And when that is affected negatively, then it can affect us negatively. So
and then we have to teach the kids them also to change and adapt.
Right. And
Yeah.
even coming back to school now, we notice
Yeah.
that in many of the schools, we are having conflicts. And so we are now trying to find ways to help our children to cope. And
Yes.
parents, we are helping you so you can help the children as well to cope with the different changes that have taken place and how they can cope with it. And we have counseling at school. We have not only counsel children, we have also counsel parents. The Parenting Commission also has offered this service where through them you can also get support, the Ministry of Education and other agencies.
Because
Yes.
Miss, it's not only you guys. We the parents have to play a big part in it also.
Yes, that is
We
so
the
true.
parents. So
That
it
is so
starts
true.
from home and then school.
Right, right.
Most kids play out what them learn from home, while
Right.
some is what
Yes.
them pick up off the street. So it
Okay.
starts from we parents. We have to try to play the part in the child's life, and we have to have a relationship both with the teachers also at the school. We have to try to have a relationship with the teachers, and I think it would work out a little better.
All right. Thanks very much for sharing. And I'm sure that other parents also would agree with you that they play a very pivotal role in helping our children and helping us to cope as teachers, and we also to help the parents to cope, because the parents need our help as well. We need each other. As Miss Roberts said at the beginning, no man is an island, we can't stand alone. So we need each other. And we need the Parenting Commission, we need the Ministry of Education. And if all of us work together, then we will see positive changes. All right. And so with our unresolved experiences that we are having, that is affecting us both emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and socially, we can seek help through different agencies. Okay. We can seek help through the school, the ministry, the Parenting Commission, and different agencies to help us to cope with some of these challenges that we are having. All right, so we should be there for each other. And as it says, one hand cannot clap, we need two hands. Next slide, Mr. Bernard. Promoting emotional health, we looked at that one already, and Miss went through that. So if you look at it, we can just look at them, be honest with your feeling, be open and process your feelings. Get things that help you to develop positively, seek support, and also receive empathy. When people are showing you that they care and that they understand, find persons who you can share with and who you can trust. All right. Next slide, please, Mr. Bernard. Promoting mental health. One way of promoting mental health is through self-talk. Meaning, you are going to look at what is happening. You are going to say to yourself, what can I do differently? What can I do to bring about positive change? So you engage yourself in self-talk, where you are now working out, what are my goals? How can I achieve these goals? Do I need help in achieving these goals? Where can I get this help from? So you are now working that out through help from others, as well as putting action into place. Affirmation. Model the behavior. You want a behavior, you have to model it. You can't do one thing and then expect a child to do another. So if you want the behavior, model the positive behavior so that a child can emulate the positive behavior. All right? And focus on the positive and less on the negatives. Yes, sir? All right, we are moving along quickly. I know that Father Clark is here. We want to welcome Father Clark as well. I saw Father Clark somewhere there. In fact, I know Father Clark wants to say something to his parents. He usually wants to welcome you and just to encourage you as well. So let me just do this slide now at the end and quickly go through so that Father Clark can speak to you shortly. All right, so promote social health, and Miss went through all of that already. Self-care, how to resolve conflict, spend time with your family members and friends, and ensure that positive communication takes place. and help each other. All right, next one, sir. And I just discussed for you spiritual, and you're going to find people that you can connect with who believe in a higher being and also in developing positive moral behavior, engage in things that help you, devotion with your family and children. Now we can go back to church, and so we can go. If we can't, we can go online. So we have different avenues by which we can build our spiritual health and always be grateful. No matter how small the thing is, always be grateful. Yes, sir. All right. So we really want to thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing as well. If you look on the screen there, there's a telephone number for the Ministry of Education, and you can contact them if there's any way in which you think that they can help you. We also have school. You can contact us if you need more information. And also when we have information from the National Parenting Commission, when there are workshops and so on, that parents can be engaging, we will also inform you. All right, so we really want to thank you for listening and for participating. And we hope that you have learned something tonight and that you have not only listened, but you are going to put into action